My name is Nicolas Johnson. I am a physical scientist with Mobile District's Spatial Data Branch, and I sit at the Joint Airborne LiDAR Bathymetry Technical Center of Expertise, and I support the operations and products for the National Coastal Mapping Program. Next slide. Yeah, I really hope to, when I share information on bathymetric LiDAR, oftentimes get questions on some of the technical, the depth performance, coverage information, and what the data looks like. So I'm gonna intermix some interagency work that's being done in the Great Lakes, along with hopefully an overview of the technology and the actual coverage acquired in our last collects through the Great Lakes. So that JAWLTEX acronym, Joint Airborne LiDAR Bathymetry Technical Center of Expertise. We're a 23-year collaboration of government, industry, and academia partners to advance bathymetric technologies around LiDAR and complementary technologies with it to face coastal challenges. Next slide. So the National Coastal Mapping Program for the Corps has actually been operating bathymetric LiDAR for project scale and small regional sediment management projects since the 90s. But since 2005, we've operated the National Coastal Mapping Program. So it's hopes to develop regional and repetitive high resolution, high accuracy elevation and imagery data to solve those coastal challenges. Our for the core normal area of interest there is 500 meters on land for topography and a kilometer offshore for bathymetry. And we also collect, like I said, hyperspectral imagery and RGB orthomosaics. Next slide. So the program has operated a number of sensors produced by Optech, now Teledyne Optech, and through the years have collaborated and worked with other agencies in supporting the needs and requirements and really pushing for the next solution now. And we're currently using the coastal zone mapping and imaging LiDAR, the seismo sensor, and we have on board in a smaller King Air style aircraft on board with the seismo sensor, a Galaxy Topo sensor, the phase 150 megapixel camera, and a ITRIS CASI 1500 hyperspectral. We typically fly 400 meters above the shore, and we have a 300 meter swath. The seismo sensor from the previous sensors send out a single transmitted laser pulse, and then it actually detects, as you see a flower in the upper left-hand corner there, it segments the returns into 7 shallow, and it also has 1 deep field of view for getting deeper data in terms of for bathymetric LiDAR. And so it turns a system that fires 10,000 shots or 10 kilohertz a second system into a effective 70 kilohertz system. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we had started in the 90s when I was probably watching Ninja Turtles, acquiring on a helicopter for small scale projects at 200 pulses a second, and you could see how every 10 years those pulses step up. So when I started with the program in 2006, we had a 3 meter pulse spacing with the charts and shoal systems, and we currently are now into a 70 centimeter posting, so it equals 2 points per square meter. And then we're at the moment testing and accepting the next generation of the system, which in the next slide I'll show an equivalent improvement, or what you could expect in terms of coverage. So on the right side of this graph, we began with just a bathy sensor, and then the sensors integrated IR and IR laser for topo measurements, and then we strapped on a camera, which it's very supportive in analyzing the bathymetry data, especially in the coastal zone area. Then we put in the hyperspectral data in the 2005 timeframe and really matured a data fusion product between the hyperspectral and bathy lidar. As Brandon Crumley did, kind of showed some use of those products. And in the next system, we're going to take advantage of some improvements in electronics to do real-time processing, and then we'll also leverage our past data and past experiences and some deep learning models to improve classification and noise determination. Next slide. So this was just kind of showing when we've went from our 2011 to the Shoal system in 2012 to the Seismo system, are some data coverage from a nearshore environment where we take the systems to be calibrated for ranging in water. So this kind of shows the prior 3 meter point posting and point spacing to the 2 points per square meter requirement that many were chasing at the time for bathy lidar. So the next system will take the 2 meter point spacing in shallow waters and move it to a 6 to 8 points per square meter, and it keeps a circular scan as Seismo does here in the lower right hand corner, which actually gives you a forward and back look. They're 4 seconds separated, which helps in the nearshore environment. Next slide. So some other things a supernova system is going to have is some field programmable modalities. So where I mentioned we have 7 shallow channels giving us the 2 points per square meter, and then a deep channel which is actually has 2 meters between its points that are acquired. It's going to allow us to choose if we want more energy devoted to the shallow channel, hopefully to extend the shallow channels point density into deeper waters, or if we're in troubled environments, we could put all the energy into just the deep channel. So to be at that 2 meter point posting, but in difficult or turbid areas, we may be able to produce images where it would be difficult. And then it also has a topographic mode. So along with controlling the energy into the channels, we can also control the pulse repetition rate, and so we can put it into a 30 kilohertz setting, which will enable the system to even acquire up to 12 points per square meter. Next slide. With a circular scan, and if you would tab one down on the page, it's going to bring up another image. Thank you. The circular scan, it with the current pulse frequency stays the same throughout the scan pattern, and so you end up with a non-uniform distribution of points. You have they're not necessarily wasted, but you have a lot of points that are in the overlap edge, and so the supernova system is going to be able to control the laser to take some of those points and control firing them in the front and back part of the scan. So it both increases your point density and it helps with point distribution. Next slide. So as with all the improvements of all these geophysical systems, every 10 years, the you want to take advantage of the electronics and improvements in technology. So the sampling rate, the digitizer rate has now doubled, and then the laser pulse itself is now able to be shortened a bit, and it's going to help with shallow water delineation, so trying to separate the return from the water surface from the return from the bottom. And will also help with target resolution and having a shorter pulse that's sampled more frequently. Next slide. And one more, I think it's just bringing in info. So the National Coastal Mapping Program, this map is this is our progress to date map. It's colored by the number of times we've visited an area. We're in California now and hope to complete California and Texas next year to complete our 3rd cycle through. So for the Great Lakes, we work with our partners in districts to kind of prioritize areas in the past. So this last collect, with the exception of Green Bay, we've kind of made a complete collect through, but you'll see some areas don't quite have 3 there. And then in the southeast, of course, we do storm response for the Corps and for FEMA, USGS, and other agencies that need that done. And so you'll see some of those areas have been surveyed up to 9 times there. Next slide. So the Great Lakes, it looks really small, but it takes about half our program because it's about half the shoreline coverage that we're after. We're typically, we skip over some marsh regions and um, some areas that might be troublesome for bathylight lidar, obviously, but we're typically after the sandy shores for our sediment management kind of core intent of the program. So next slide. It does take us somewhere between 2 and 3 years, just depending on when we start and how those survey operations are done. So the next 3 slides, I'll walk through the 2018, 19, and 20. It will be a production kind of status map along with some metrics about those collects. So in 2018, we came off the East Coast, finishing up the New England area, and we jumped right into Ontario. Ontario went real quickly. We were a little late in the year than we'd really want to be for Lake Erie. The kind of middle, like later summer before fall, is a better period for water clarity. But we hit it a little late, and it was pretty dirty. We were called off to do some other projects on the East Coast, and then when we came back, we decided we would hold Erie to a further year to hopefully get a better water clarity and results there. So we jumped up to Huron. This particular status map, the link will take you to different years, and you can kind of see our production status level. And most of this data, at some point will land in Digital Coast. So at the moment, this map is outdated because 18 is kind of removed from the production status map, but 18 Ontario is now at Digital Coast. Huron is now in production, which means we're producing grids, and I'll have some dates updated for when that'll be available later. And Erie is sitting on a virtual machine for me to QC. Some challenges in these areas might be nuclear power plants and airspace around Niagara, and of course dirty waters from Lake Erie. Next slide. So 2019 was a real productive year. We had a small hiccup in June between a laser needing to be recalibrated, and then we also hit a unfavorable, probably 2-week period where it seems the winds were either 40 knots and we couldn't fly, or they were no knots and there was a glassy water surface, and the laser had a difficult time detecting the water surface. For this production map is actually up to date, so it's we're waiting for the completion of Lake Superior all the way through products before we deliver it to Digital Coast. But the darker green areas are available. If you would email, we can get those out if you need them now. And at the bottom we have some dates there. So I hope for sure by November 19th we have Superior over to Digital Coast and Huron by January 21st. Next slide. So this was our 20 campaign. Of course, this was going through the post COVID period, so our field team was stripped down and had to deal with the limited operations relative to the footprint we usually sent out into the field. And I guess operating around the buildings was pretty difficult in terms of airspace, and that always is. We've been through that before. And on the West Coast, just dealing with some rains. We actually in 2019 tried to start in the northwest side of Lake Michigan and had 3 blocks that pretty much were providing no data. In the following year, or coming back this year, was full coverage block. So we're glad we decided to hold off on that one. Michigan, I hope to have out May 27th, and Erie. These are just some projected dates out by August. And some of these, when they're required and when they'll be out in terms of dates, are kind of driven by priority. So some of the grain blocks you see are going through production and we're getting ready to deliver in Michigan. Those are kind of core priority projects that have been called out. Next slide. So our standard products, we deliver 1 meter DSMs, 1 meter. So we do surface models and terrain models. We produce a 0 contour, 0 lake contour. We do 5 centimeter ortho mosaics, and we do hyperspectral mosaics as well. So some other folks have mentioned, our data is going into their either general bathymetry data sources, or if it was for um, charting support. I know we've worked with NOAA on which areas we've had good data for, so they know to kind of collect. They could elect around those. And then for the Corps' interests, as I mentioned, there are regional sediment management intent to beginning. So we do collect still for that purpose, and it supports the Great Lakes and sediment budgets. We do coastal assets and coastal structure features from that. And with hyperspectral, we have projects that spin off for habitat characterizations. And then, like I said, in the temporal of where we've collected data, the emergency response and volume calculations are run with these data products. Next slide. So the data is distributed through NOAA Digital Coast. So that you hit the data viewer there and draw a little square, you'll get the products. The classified point data is sent to them. We deliver it straight to the district offices and to the Corps' grid system. If you have a project that's in dire need and you see it on our production map and it's not going to be out for some time, if it's absolutely critical and it could prevent collecting, we do try to work with people, but it's a little difficult. If your area of interest is the entire Great Lakes, then it's back to the normal timeline. Next slide. So to address the how deep do you go and where do you have data, if you follow the link at the bottom here to take you to NOAA's KD viewer, so their attenuation or loss of light viewer, and it has a slider, and I slid around till I got to October, because I thought this month best kind of showed where we could start talking about the coverage for the Great Lakes and what bathy LiDAR can provide. So immediately two things for me, like I say, the sore thumb of the Great Lakes there is Saginaw Bay being shallow and dirty, and then Lake Erie. And if you get into that map and you slide around, you'll see from year to year, if you start playing with some satellite imagery, it's not always a consistent pattern there, but it's definitely a lake that's difficult for our system. Some other areas that were difficult just east of Duluth through the Apostle Islands, we have 5 meter to limited or no bathy coverage there. I recall South Green Bay in 2012 was very difficult, where the north side was very productive. And so for the seasonal system, it has a performance measurement, or a KD max of 4.3. So if you divide that by the KD value from one of these lakes, you'll get about a max depth from one of these systems, or from this system. So I actually didn't pull this KD value that's for the lakes here from the image. I actually backed it out from the data that was observed, and I just used the average of the average depths there. Of course, the lakes vary. So when I say Ontario's 10 to 15 meters, Western Ontario might be 10 meters. Eastern Ontario, you'd see 15 meters. So each lake kind of has spots that are a little bit cleaner than the others. And then Superior, and we were able to get 30 meters in some places. And on average, you get a 15 to 25 meter depth there. Next slide. So for the next few slides, I'm just going to show some success and challenges for each lake, and maybe some just pretty pictures that just kind of show So on the west side there, this is looking over the western portion of Lake Ontario, and you could see the outer extent of the data is pretty continuous. So it's 10 to 12 meters is the extinction depth of the system. And then when you look at the nearshore environment, there would be several flight blocks that were full, and then a flight block that wasn't. And sometimes we will wait 3 days if it's following a rain event or high wind event. Like many have said, the Great Lakes kind of throw you little curveballs all the time. So we try to work around those curveballs and give ourselves 3 or 5 days and hit areas again, but they're not always that successful. And on the eastern side of the lake in the bottom image is just to kind of show that you have some inland bays that are pretty shallow and pretty dirty, or you have some harbors that have some large waters of body that flow through them, and they oftentimes are pretty challenging as well. I know my first attempt through Niagara, and I think it was in 06, 07 timeframe. We didn't get coverage up of the falls as great as we did this last collect. So this is the 2018 shot through the Niagara River. It was pretty good coverage. Next slide. So Lake Erie, like I said, the western part of the lake is pretty, limited to shallower than 5 meters, or in many places, honestly, there's no data there. That's some pretty dirty water. But east of Presque Isle, I wanted to show this from 11 to an 18 standpoint. Even though there might be a system that gets better depth performance, it's the water clarity drops a lot here. And then if you were to kind of zoom in and play with the coverage, you'll see that 1 year might have better depth in an area, but not as good near shore coverage. So in cases like these are still pretty good data sets for the Corps in terms of conglomerating the data for general bathymetry, or looking at sediment budget analysis, or understanding um, changes to bluffs and stuff. Next slide. So north of Saginaw Bay for Lake Huron, and this is looking over the Alpena area up towards Lake Michigan, is definitely the cleanest area there in Lake Huron, and those are pretty repeatable depths to 20 meters. Several you'll see several blocks here, and again in Superior and Michigan, where our intent is to collect to 1,000 out. In some places we cover more, but the coverage will stop. That's just our intent. We don't always collect out to extinction, so we leave a little out there, but that's just our program. So you can see a couple different harbors and bays that have full coverage through. A lot of bays and a lot of harbors in Michigan have a lot of vegetation in them, which can be fun for bathymetric LiDAR as well. Saginaw Bay is not always, even though it's really red, it's actually some of that, I think, from that Katie viewer is actually from it being is really shallow as well. So we have some coverage through there, and usually about to the 4 to 5 meter range. And you can see the further southwest blocks in there are absolutely really don't have much coverage at all. And the Great Lakes, and I'll show some examples in Superior, have tons of features on the bottom that keep our team on teams, trying to figure out what objects are and what things what are out there. So we're always passing around interesting graphics. The south area down towards Port Huron is kind of like some of those areas on Western Ontario, where in any given day we could have complete coverage blocks and then struggle in another block, and those we make attempts to, but the operational pace to get around the coast, we kind of have to move through. Next slide. So Lake Superior, like I was saying, it's the Superior in terms of water quality. So we again find more interesting features. These are just Great Sands Bay, Eagle Harbor, and then I agree. I started working in bathy lidar for Fugro, and a colleague of mine that worked there is now in the federal government in Canada, and we both work bathy lidar, and I get up to the top there and just have great seasons and great data, and then just have to stop because there's a border and some program definition limitations. So I too think it'd be cool if we could collaborate in that sense. Next slide. This would be just more examples of where our program might get off to 2 kilometers offshore, um, for the efficiency of collecting our area of interest, but you just kind of can't keep adding lines. It's a great picture of some structure at Pictured Rocks, and full coverage there through the Taconite Harbor. Next slide. So Lake Michigan is currently being processed for a lot of priorities in the Corps. A lot of it's on the western side. So from Milwaukee to Chicago, it's really heavily populated and a lot of harbors, and a lot of those are pretty dirty. So we see from block to block, we go from full coverage to places that are spotty. We were able to fill them a lot of those in, like I stated earlier, with some reflights. The bottom graphic just shows some interesting vegetation features that are in there, and then maybe that Bailey generation station to just fun things that you see in the day you get to just share with your all your coworkers. The eastern southeastern side of Lake Michigan, it was really good. 15 to 20 meters of coverage, full near shore data is there. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the regional sediment management before the National Coastal Mapping Program, with the repeat data sets and the a lot of calls to doing storm assessment, uh, a lot of our districts were wanting these data in and wanting the data in fast for volumetrics and understanding their erosion and accretion situation. So we have now in a toolbox and work with the Engineering Research Development Center and some private partners to get these tools and some automated features where we can drop in our elevation data and extract out these volumes into some PDFs. So in the next few years, we hope to put in some feature extraction. So we do some metrics, which will be up in the upcoming slides from dunes and sandbars, and then we support modeling for resilience and some other items that we would like to stick in this in the upcoming years. Next slide. So the districts have used our data for some time for support in sediment budget. But this, as part of the Great Lake Restoration Initiative, the environmental research group are helping the districts in sucking in features and metrics from the elevation data to better support the sediment budget. And so at the bottom there, you'll see some data sets that are needed for this budget. And so if you go to the next page, of course, extraction of bluffs which feed are positive into that sediment budget. So extracting out the edge, the toe, and those elevations are a bit more accurate when using LiDAR and elevation data over maybe some past imagery techniques. Next slide. So different core research groups at various districts I know have worked on some vulnerability indexes, trying to understand which nearshore features are most important to coastal change. And so in the Great Lakes, I know that the same environmental group that's extracting out these metrics are providing the USACE teams, the district teams, and the modeling efforts. And I know NOAA and USGS support them as well in the modeling efforts and trying to figure out which of these metrics are most important there. Next slide. So Brandon mentioned the Benthic mapping and Benthic features that kind of get pulled out of conglomerating and sharing all this, and so I won't really kind of cover through that in this slide to explain why. some of that works, and who some of that work's done with. But the Buffalo district also realized, when we're in the area and working, that we have that capability for the kind of wetlands characterization, having that hyperspectral camera on board. So Molly Reef at Erdict has really been great at helping Corps and other agency groups with utilizing these data sets. Next slide. I think that's it.